Hey guys, what up? So we're going to be building a blog platform starting from scratch. I decided I'm just going to go ahead and keep the same name that was named after my dog on a previous Node.js platform that I tried to build that I didn't really do anything with. But in this case, we're going to actually build the entire thing together. And really the motivation behind all this is just simply because I want to be able to write every once in a while. And I just want to have a simple Node.js blogging platform that's already written, where essentially you just go ahead and download it and you run it and you have everything you need to get going for your basic blog stuff. And I suppose one of the main motivations as well is that, like, a lot of people have been coming out with these stories that say you don't need Medium. I've been saying that for years. You don't want to have all your content on somebody else's platform and have all these rules and regulations put in place for you. This doesn't provide that many tools. We're essentially going to try to build a Medium clone. And in order to do that, we're actually going to use a brand new Node.js framework called Fastify. And Fastify is actually something that not a lot of people are talking about right now, but it is a very fast framework. It's built with REST APIs in mind. The thing that I love most about it is simply that if we look at the history of REST-based architecture, it's these days you have REST, right? Your typical REST endpoints, and for those endpoints you have tools like Swagger to help with documentation, help have like an actual, understandable API. Because the problem with JSON REST APIs is that simply you have to communicate with endpoints in specific ways by passing objects, and those objects have to have certain key value pairs in order for the server to know what type of data to respond with. And in many cases, these REST APIs are set up so that they return a lot of JSON data, and the client may or may not need all of it or some of it. And the fact that you don't need all of it is really the motivation, or one of the main motivations behind Facebook's tool GraphQL. GraphQL is essentially an alternative to REST-based API. We're not going to use GraphQL in this. One of the things I don't like about GraphQL is that there is a single endpoint that you're communicating with. So one of the biggest failures of GraphQL is dealing with caching. So they're coming up with new ways of being able to work around that since you have one single endpoint. But the magic is behind that one single endpoint versus a larger REST-based architecture. So one of the things that, I think GraphQL obviously does, schemas and handling, there's very good work behind it. But one of the things that we're going to do is we're going to focus most on building our own JSON schema, basically our own GraphQL, using just Fastify. And how do we do that? Fastify gives you the option of using different JSON schemas. And there's a lot of different versions and such, but basically what this is it just tells you that, like, when you define a schema, you're saying, okay, this endpoint is going to take in an object. It's going to have a key. That key is going to be of type string. It's going to have another key, and the value is going to be of type number. So that's basically what these schemas do. They identify how your API works and like what type of request it's expecting and what type of response it's going to give you. So we can do the magic of GraphQL by simply limiting data by having a JSON schema. And in addition to that, you're going to have much easier capabilities when it comes to actually caching specific API endpoints. I used to communicate with Redbox's API on a Django application that I had, and I use memcache. So memcache, the problem with that is you had to do your cache over every time you restarted the server. But I use memcache because I didn't want to have to hit the database over and over again. And with Fastify, we're going to easily be able to implement caching should we need to. All right, and then finally, Fastify's selling points is simply it uses a sync and await architecture, which I like, and it's also very small, and it's one of the fastest node frameworks out there. I think it's probably the fastest. Maybe there's one or two that could be it's definitely the fastest, much faster than Express or anything like that. All right, so what I'm going to do, I need to go ahead and use Git because there's a project out there that I'm going to be building this off of so you guys can have access to the code. And I'm just going to use a repository that I already made because I just, I don't know, because it's a Node.js framework that it was like half done and I didn't get to do what I wanted to do with it. But that is right here, so it's on GitHub. So we're going to go ahead and just clone this right here. And I'll end up deleting literally everything in here. I don't want any of it. So what I'm going to do is say open and terminal. And really what I need to do, because I'm on a crappy Windows machine, I have to open up the Git bash. So the way I communicate with Git and use Git on Windows, because the command prompt is not exactly Unix, like I go ahead and I just use this, which is more Linux or Mac. Anyway, same thing. All right, guys. So let's go ahead and you need to figure out where your project's gonna go. So in my case, I just have a projects directory and I put everything in there. All right, so I went ahead and I CD'd into my Bayside version 2 folder, and that's also what I have Visual Studio Code opened up to as well. So I'm gonna go ahead and git clone the project right here. And one second. You gotta say git clone, and then you can clone the project. And then now you can see that I have this Bayside folder, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up into that folder actually. So I'm going to go into that, select that as my folder because that's where Git is. I can leave the Git ignore, so a lot of this stuff I can go ahead and leave. But now, just to start fresh, I'm getting rid of this the package.json. I'll leave the README for now because I'm going to need that anyway. I'll get rid of the log. I don't care about that. License, it'll be MIT, that's fine. We're going to leave the CLI in here because we are going to have to create a command line interface tool. So yeah, some of this stuff is going to remain for right now. So just you guys can ignore this, but what we're going to do is create our first project file so that we can use for Fastify, and we're going to call this server.js. So it's just an empty file here. All right, so since this is going to be an entire project and we wiped out our package.json file, let's go ahead and add that. So we're going to go ahead and knit a new one. So let's go ahead and say right click in here and just say reveal, open in terminal, I mean. All right, and then just say npm init. We're going to create a project file. I'm going to call it Bayside. Could have just left it there, but whatever. I'm going to leave all that empty for right now. I don't care. So this is a brand new empty package here. And now what we want to do is go ahead and install Fastify. So we're going to say npm install and then say -- save and then Fastify. And the reason why we want to do save is this is going to be an actual dependency of the project. All right, so here you can see that we do have the Fastify version 2.6, which should be the latest version. All right, so let's go back to the server. And I'm going to go ahead and just copy this entire like starting Fastify code from their website so we can test to make sure everything's working correctly. So you can see here what this does is it creates a constant variable for Fastify. It requires a library that we installed. And then this it passes in a configuration object that allows the logging to be true. Fastify comes with a built-in logger called Pino, which is a pretty popular logging system. So that's what it's actually using internally. But you can see it will log all kinds of information. All right, so what this does right here, this is declaring your route. So this / is just the root domain of your server-side application. And it's going to return a simple JSON object. So it can return this, and it's going to show it basically as a string on our browser, which could be interpreted via JavaScript and turned into an actual JSON object by serializing it from a string to an actual object. All right, so in order to actually run the project, we're going to say node server.js. And because we have the logging on, this is where you're going to get all this logging stuff. All right, so if we go to the browser, and if you're in Chrome, you right click and say inspect element. It's going to pull up the Chrome developer tools. And then from inside here, what we're going to do is paste some code. I want to show you what's going on behind the scenes here. So if we were to go ahead and use the fetch API, and we're going to make a request to our endpoint, localhost, and then this is a promise. So this is going to return a promise, and then eventually you're going to get this response.json, and then we're going to pass it down into the callback function here, and we're going to alert that the response that's coming back is obviously going to be an actual JavaScript object, a JSON object that you could interact with using Vue or Angular or React or whatever it is. And then you have here we're actually going to do the taking the JSON object and then turning it to a string or a JavaScript object, I should say. All right, so here we go. It's a promise, and then you get object alerted to the screen, and then here you're getting the actual string value of the JSON object that got returned. So basically from here, what we're going to do is we need to actually deliver a home page, because this is going to be a relatively simple like single page app type of thing. At least initially, but the home page is going to then make additional calls out to subsequent pages that are going to be our actual API. So our API endpoints are going to return JSON data as we've just shown, but we also need to have a home page that's going to return an actual HTML string slash HTML. You know what I mean? So like you pass back a string of HTML to the browser, it interprets it as HTML. So the server is passing back an actual string on the server side, Node.js, and but the browser is interpreting the string value as HTML because you're passing a bunch of HTML as a string. So hopefully that makes sense, because a lot of people probably don't understand how client-server architecture works, but your server is running Node.js. Node.js is essentially C and C++ code. It's running on some sort of machine. Your client is running their own machine, and they're using a browser to make a JavaScript request, or even just a browser request using TCP/IP, and they make the request out to your server. Server connects with them, passes back a string value. The string value is interpreted as HTML because the server is saying, hey, this is the type of content I'm sending you back. It's called HTML. If we look at the actual network panel here and we click on the request, you can see that inside the headers, this is where all the magic works, because the server is basically saying, hey, I'm responding back with application JSON, which is JSON data. And then we're using the UTF-8 character set versus like ASCII. And then you get the response back here. So anyway, if you guys, it's beyond the scope of this tutorial, but like essentially the browser's headers are how browsers are like, okay, this is HTML and this is something else. All right, guys, moving on. What we need to do is go ahead and install our first plugin into Fastify. Fastify is actually built with a very plugin based model. It's very easy to understand plugins versus middleware and how that stuff is all interpreted. There's an entire pipeline. I'm not going to get into all that yet. But for right now, though, we need Fastify static so that we can actually return templates without having to set all that, the headers that I was just telling you about. We would have to write actual custom code to return back headers for like CSS and JavaScript and like all this different stuff in HTML. That's what this project is already doing for us. So it's not part of Fastify because Fastify is mostly about being a REST-based API. But if you wanted to actually use Fastify as well, to use it as more of an express and then have actual templates, that's the best of both worlds in my opinion. So we're going to install this. There's going to be certain endpoints that return actual HTML templates and or CSS, JavaScript, images. And then there's going to be endpoints that are going to be returning the actual JSON data, which we'll be able to cache and use JSON schema validators and such to make it the serialization faster and things like that. So we're going to get into all that stuff in this tutorial. You guys are going to be experts by the time this is done. So this is also a good example of how programmers work. It's like, well, how do we do this? Okay, you just copy this joint. And it's also going to be a developer dependency because let me go ahead and stop the server by pressing Control-C. But it's a developer dependency, not developer dependency. It's an actual it's a dependency. I'm sorry, because we do need this for our server to run. So when we go to install this on our Linode stack, we're gonna want to go ahead and have this. We want this all to just work well, right? We're gonna use this entire architecture, and it's gonna go on an actual server. And what you guys see here locally is what is gonna be available to the public on at least one endpoint, one domain that by the end of the tutorial series, I'll have one domain that this thing is working on. And then you guys can go ahead and try to exploit it, I suppose. I'm just kidding. Don't do that, please. All right, so what I want to do is I want to keep this basic request, and we're just going to have this called test. Maybe not test. We're going to have this called just, this is going to be about, right? And we're going to say about Chris Hawks. All right, so that's going to be our about endpoint. So if we want to go ahead and create a new endpoint, what I'm going to do first, I need to go ahead and register Fastify as a plugin. So this is how you actually register a plugin. You have to just say fastify.register, and you then pass in the actual plugin that we're registering, which is what we just installed, Fastify static. And then here we're saying, hey, we're going to have a public folder, which is where all of our like JavaScript, CSS, everything is going to go. So let's go ahead and create that folder now because you're going to need that. So I said pubic. It's getting X-rated up in here. So yeah, anyway, I created that folder, and now I'm going to create a CSS folder, and hopefully I don't do any more typos. JS folder, because we need that, right? We also need an image folder. And then That's good. All right. And then we need to go ahead and define our template in here. So let's go ahead and create our index.html, which is like standard for like the home page. So let's go ahead and write that out. All right. So now I just want to have a basic template so that we're returning this stuff. And then we also want to, let's go ahead and link to our actual CSS and stuff like that we're going to create. So style sheet. This is how you link to an actual CSS page. So let's go ahead and say, look in the public folder, look in the CSS, and we're going to have a main.css file. All right. And then let's go ahead and load a script tag down at the bottom, just before the closing body tag, and you're going to want to put a source on that, and this is going to also point to the public folder. And this is how, like, internally Fastify static is going to know, okay, I need to go ahead and, this is a JavaScript file, let me set the headers and all this other stuff. So that's a lot of work being done for us right now. So let's just go ahead and have a main.js file. And for right now, let's go ahead and create those files, right? So we're going to have a main.js, and if this thing loads, we're going to say, hey, alert, this worked. All right, and then we're gonna have a CSS file, and it's main.css. And let's change the color of our header, and I do this a lot on my tutorials. We're gonna change it to red so we know the CSS file is loading and also working. And images I'm not gonna worry about for right now, but it's the same concept. Obviously, you just link to your image through the public folder route. All right, guys. So now what I want to do is, we need to go back to our server.js file, the main part. After we've loaded this, I'm going to create a new endpoint. This is going to be for our, and this is right from their documentation too, so it doesn't matter. I hate to, I like that better. I'll end up getting rid of some of this stuff, but we want this to be the root directory. And instead of this, we're going to have it return HTML. Also, if you guys notice, we're using path here, path right here. So we need to go ahead and require that. So we're going to say constant path equals require. This is just a common module that comes with your Node.js installation, so you don't have to install anything. All right, so if everything goes well, this thing is going to go ahead and at the root directory, it's going to go ahead and respond back with HTML that it's going to be getting from the public folder of our project, which we have over here. And you can see the index.html. So this should all be returned if everything works correctly. Make sure you press Control-Shift-S. Don't do that, actually. Press Control-S and just save all your files here so everything's working. All right, we need to go ahead and fire the server back up. So say node server.js. And if we go and we request a page, you can see now we have the alert message working, we have the CSS working, and the HTML is being delivered. If we inspect and we look at the network panel and we request this over again by refreshing, click on this joint, and then here you could see that, boom, text HTML is being returned. There's work behind the scenes, and that's what we use Fastify static for. That's actually one of the downfalls of this Bayside.js project is I ended up having to write all these like headers, and I was like, I didn't really write all of them. I think eventually I used the project, or maybe I didn't, but either way, I was having to write some of those headers, and like, I was just like, nah, work's already been done for you, you know what I mean? All right, guys, so we're doing pretty good here. Now what we need to do is go ahead and make this thing look a little bit more professional. So let's just go ahead and quickly download one of these free themes. You can download any one you want, but just follow along because it's going to be the similar process here. So let's go ahead and free download. And also make sure you check out startbootstrap.com. I've actually used them a bunch of times, so that's a great site. They have not a whole lot of options there, but I tell you, like, anytime I would buy more templates if they weren't such piles of shit, like so many of them. So my issue is that so many of them are really just garbage, and like I don't like it. So even this shit, like, look at all this stuff. It comes with a SaaS. I mean, it's great, I guess, because eventually, like, if you do want to work with SaaS, then it's a good thing to have here. But what we need to do is we need to extract this to our projects, Bayside, V2, Bayside. We want it to go into the public folder. So just do that, and then you're going to say yes to all, so it overwrites. And now we need to go into the index.html because this is what's going to be returned. And if you look, we now have this vendor folder and all this other stuff. So what we need to do is we need to, any sort of local reference that's being made here, we need to put the public on there, public. So that way the request can go through. And yeah, so we need that anywhere like the local requests are being made, like here's CSS. So it's all pretty pretty obvious, I think. But I got to go through and do all this crap. Hopefully there's not a ton of images. Here there's images in this joint. Ah, damn it. I'm going to end up missing some, but I don't care. I'm just going to go through this real quick because I want you guys to see that it works. I'll clean it up later, but you guys have to just go through and fix all these links so that it points to the public folder, and it uses this public route to actually handle Fastify, or Fastify static uses this public route. So it's really important that the public route is there. That's how the magic's happening. All right, so let's go ahead and save this for right now. Let's view it. All right, so just like that, we now have an actual professional looking site. I'll go ahead and clean it up real quick, but if you guys go through and fix all those links, then it will work. All right, guys, so I went ahead and I cleaned it up. I have all the links now working, so the thing looks a lot better. I did have it super zoomed in before. But here you can see, just like that, we could actually go and deploy this website. You guys could alter this HTML and have an actual portfolio website. So there's no reason why you shouldn't have a domain of your name as a portfolio. Like, you should have something out there, right? All right, guys, so in the next video, what we're going to do is we're actually going to start ripping out a lot of this custom theme. But I did want to show you how you could easily add your own theme. But for this project and where we're going to go moving forward is that I'm going to rip this thing out because it's going to look just like Medium. And not like exactly like it, but it's going to be this clean kind of font thing. But one of the first things that we're going to start on is actually the backend admin portal. Like, what are you going to log into to actually write your blog? Because ideally, this system should actually have the way that you write your blog should be stored and saved in a way that it's also just like the way you write it is the way it's displayed. So I'm going to show you how we can use some tools and things like that in order for that to happen.